Hey guys, it's Bernie Knuckles here, and today I want to ask you guys a question. How much do you know about the events that occurred in northern France on the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944? Well, it's definitely hard to find someone that has not heard of the events that occurred that day. It's not unusual for people to be unaware of unknown stories on such an iconic day in history, and there are certainly many untold stories of heroism and sacrifice during the war, and many go unnoticed until they somehow get brought to light by media such as movies, games, or books. Today, I'm going to tell you guys about a D-Day story I'm sure many of you may be aware of since there was a PBS documentary and a book written about it. But nonetheless, I was unaware of it too, so some of you may be as well. So the story takes us to a small commune in the Normandy region of northwestern France called Angoville-au-Plain. I'm sure I butchered that name, please forgive me. This small commune is located just a few miles inland from the infamous Utah beach of Normandy. Angoville, with a population of about 50 people, a few homes, and one narrow road that leads to a 12th old century church, appears to be nothing but an insignificant dot on the map. But on this particular day, it would leave its mark on history forever. Our leading protagonists of this story are two U.S. Army medics by the names of Robert Wright and Kenneth Moore of the 101st Airborne Division. As medics of the 101st, they were dropped behind enemy lines in the early hours of June 6th before the amphibious assault on the beaches of Normandy began. The job of the 101st, along with the 82nd Airborne Division, was to cut off the main road connecting Cherbourg to Paris, which was a crucial road to the German forces. This road just happened to pass close to our small commune, Angoville. In the first few hours of the operation, thousands of Allied paratroopers found themselves scattered across the French countryside. The terrain they landed in was muddy, wet, and full of hedgerows. As the paratroopers landed, they began to regroup in the middle of the night, and the battle with enemy soldiers soon ensued. And the small town of Angoville found itself right in the middle of the action. Looking for a suitable location to set up a first aid station, medics Wright and Moore decided on the small church in the center of the village of Angoville. The fighting continued outside the church, and by the evening the medics found themselves treating dozens of wounded soldiers and even a couple of local girls named Lucine and Jean Vienne, who got injured by a mortar round. While the medics tended to the wounded, the medics periodically would leave the church, go into the fields in the middle of the action, risking their lives to search for the injured, bringing them back in a wheelbarrow. Hacksaw Ridge would be proud, wouldn't he? The battle here raged on for 3 days, with both sides occupying the village at various times. When the American troops could no longer hold the point and were forced to retreat, Wright and Moore were told that they were on their own, but despite that, the medics stayed to continue to tend to the wounded in the church. When the Germans arrived, they entered the church, but surprisingly left the two American medics alone and let them treat the wounded. Why would the Germans do this, you ask? Well, to the Germans' surprise, when they entered the church, not only were the two medics treating American GIs and locals, but also German soldiers as well. When the Germans saw this, they decided to leave the two medics alone and left them to do their job. Wright and Moore were holed up in the church 3 days. Unable to get supplies, they had to make do with what little they had, and because there were so many wounded and it was just the two of them, they never slept that entire time. At one point during the fighting, a mortar shell hit the roof of the church, causing more casualties, and the windows in the church had all been shattered due to gunfire. Some of the gunfire was from American troops because they believed that Germans were holed up in the church. A few days after setting up camp in the church, it turns out that there were two German soldiers camped up on the church tower the entire time, and they came down with their hands up and surrendered themselves to the two medics. By the 8th of June, 1944, the fighting around Angoville-au-Plain had come to a stop. The Allies had secured the area and were on their way to liberate Paris. But this little small church played a pivotal role in many people's lives. Wright and Moore saved more than 80 people during their time in the church, including one of the two local girls, Jean Vienne. Sadly, Lucine died of her wounds, as well as did two other soldiers. Lucine remains buried in the church cemetery in Angoville-au-Plain to this day. The shattered windows today have been replaced with two beautiful stained glass windows, one depicting American paratroopers who liberated Angoville, and the other honoring Wright and Moore for their heroic efforts on that day. The benches that were used to treat the wounded in the church still show the bloodstains from the wounds of war from 75 years ago. They serve as a reminder of what took place there. Today, outside the church lays a small cemetery, and among the old tombstones lies a modern one with the initials R.E.W. You guessed it. Robert E. Wright passed away on December 21st, 2013 at age 89, and his connection to this place was never lost since he asked to be buried here when the time came. Kenneth Moore also died at the age of 90 on December 7, 2014, a year later, in Sonoma, California due to heart failure. These brave men performed a miracle years ago, and it can be hard to forget what that generation had to go through. But if you ever find yourself traveling to that region of France, Of course you must see Normandy, but also pay a visit to these men, because every soldier who participated in the war had a story to be told. Let's not forget that. As always, thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, give me a thumbs up. If not, a thumbs down. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.